Headlice. You can see right here.
So it's an absurd little platform game where you play as an escaped biological experiment. It's a louse crab hybrid about the size of a football. It runs through the levels and it smashes things and destroys equipment. And you can jump into the heads of humans and pretend to be humans for a little bit. So wander around the office and do some jobs, that kind of stuff. Burst out of them again and then run around and destroy stuff. It's an absolute chaos run, and like we absolutely love just the fast-paced way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up. It's just chaos. The main character is called Krabby, the Headlice, because he kind of looks like a crab, but he's also a headlice. And he's just kind of wreaking havoc and revenge on this corporation that created him.
The evil corporation in the game is a coffee company. It's set in the late 1990s during the dot-com boom, and this company has got too much money and don't know what to do with it. So they figure they're going to make the perfect cup of coffee by breeding hybrid animals as fermenters, and you play as a fermenter. You start out as a tiny little egg with a crab inside of it, and you fall into a coffee cup, and an employee drinks the coffee cup and groans. And then a button appears on screen, just a prompt. And as soon as you press that button, the person's head explodes, and there's jibs flying everywhere, and this gigantic, like, crab louse thing the size of a football just flops out and lands on the floor with a squish. And for us, we feel like it sets the tone from the very first action. This game is going to be weird, gross, funny, unpredictable, and sort of it's the whole game in the first half second.
And yeah, like everything you could possibly think of that a Headlice can do, we tried to get it in there, even stuff they can't do. You can control people as Krabby as well. So not only do you jump in people's heads and drag them around like a rag doll, but you can get into what we call meat suit mode, which is where you rise up from the ground and then you can essentially be an office worker, or you could be a security guard or a forklift driver or anything. And basically you can interact with people, you can pick up weapons, guns, and kind of, it's like a little bit of a stealth mechanic too, to be able to walk around the office as this person. So it gives people kind of lots of different options when they play the game. You can do that, or you can just literally jump around and pop the heads. So it's up to you.
There's this one particular section in the game where players will go into meat suit, because there's a prompt to do so. And they walk past somebody who's standing by a photocopier, and probably like 8 out of 10 people will stop and have an imaginary conversation with the person at the photocopier. About half of them then, kill the guy, but that's up to them really. But it's just the fun of pretending to be a human in this game.
I think the main idea originated from, we wanted to start with a bit of a brief when we started making the game. So we started with the idea of traversal and like how to kind of get through a level in kind of ridiculous or interesting ways instead of just kind of running through in a standard third person kind of game. And we kind of played around with like procedural animation and like ragdoll physics and stuff, and somehow it ended up being this Headlice dragging a body through an environment, and it was just always funny, it was always ridiculous, and we just kept building on top of it. So yeah, the idea basically came from, let's just keep adding ideas on top of this, and everything you could possibly think of, we were like, yeah, do it. Like, do we have a crane? Yeah, let's add a crane. Do we have a forklift? Yep, add it. Do we have office chairs where you can control the person on the chair and wheel around? Like, yeah. It's just the idea of you go around the corner and you see like a giant mechanized robot that this corporation have built, even though they have nothing to do with robots. It's just, yeah, we want to add a robot. Or it's like a turret inside this office building, or like, it's just basically turning a corner and just seeing absurdity. So every idea was basicly approved.
We initially thought we'd play it straight, and so we had this little parasite game. The demo was you run along as a little low poly crab, jump into a low poly body, and you start swinging around the level like Spider-Man, but you're dragging a ragdoll. And people, for obvious reasons, found it hard to take that seriously. So we thought, well, it is a pretty horrifying concept, really, but it's also quite absurd. And so we kind of let ourselves be guided by the playtest there, and yeah, leaned into it as much as possible. We were looking for something kind of topical, and the idea that we'd landed on was kind of how crypto seemed to be a fad, and then originally it was about this gigantic crypto company like building animals and things like that. We kind of realized that that's not exactly timeless. It might be in right now. In a couple of years, that could be something we don't care about anymore. Whereas winding things back to the 90s, it's got a certain charm to it, and then amoral companies that's also a timeless thing. And the idea of the coffee thing was, we were just looking for some unusual, unexpected reason for this crab thing to exist, and we came up with the thing. There's a thing called a civet cat that eats coffee beans, and then apparently makes really good coffee. And it just seems like such an absurd thing to do in real life. Like, who came up with this, and why did they think it was a good idea? But you know what? Let's try that and see how it lands. But all of us are caffeine addicts in our own ways in the company, so kind of vibes with us. So this is actually the second game that we've worked on as a studio. We were working on a much more ambitious title originally, and sort of in the indie space, what you're trying to do is de-risk things as much as you can to, bring on investors later on, or just make sure your project will land. And we decided to put the ambitious title on hold, and then as a studio focus on something smaller and more achievable. So get all the experience of going through the full end-to-end cycle. So we built up a little bit of a war chest from some client work, and we started just in January this year with a team of 7, so 3 artists, 3 developers, and a producer as a tiebreaker. And we just started building iterations on that initial prototype. So we had our first playtest 2 weeks later, and then we've had playtests about every 2 weeks since. I think at the moment, there's something like over 2,000 playtests that have gone through, the vast majority on Steam, mind you, but we've done about 100 or so in person, as well as across our Discord. And essentially what we're looking for, whenever anyone plays our game, we want to look for the bits where they get stuck, the bits where they laugh, the bits where they try something. So if someone enters a room and tries to pick up a prop gun, well, let's make it so you can pick that up. So it's just finding the fun, iterating over it, and then just sort of doing the indie due diligence of making sure we know what we're doing for this title, so that we can move on to the next ones later. We followed the history of Valve. So the original Half-Life followed that model, where they got to the end and realized it wasn't fun to play. And so when Portal came along, which was a very small indie team that Valve acquired, they had to play test every 2 weeks. And we thought, hey, that sounds like a really great idea to come up with something awesome and not have to rebuild it later. At the moment, we're working on levels and some iterations on the skill tree and abilities and things like that. We're trying to flesh out the demo, which is currently on Steam, to a full game. So we're pretty sure we know the direction we want to go in. We've got the general story mapped out, and it's just a matter of knuckling down and doing that work.
We kind of wanted to explore places outside of just offices, even though offices are quite interesting to explore in games. It's not too many offices in games. So we're kind of pushing where you can go deeper into this mega corporation and changing the environment quite drastically as you go, and adding tons of different skills that Krabby can unlock throughout the game, and like a skill tree. And we're currently in the process of adding hats for Krabby, because it's very important to have hats in your game.
What is your go-to caffeinated beverage when working on the game?
Oh, I love a classic mocha, because how can you not like hot chocolate and coffee in one go? So that's my go-to, and I drink it out of the Coffee Corp mug, which is the branded company in our game, which is quite a convenient cup to drink out of.
Yeah, my go-to is the office espresso machine, which is about 30 paces that way. Soy flat white is my go-to.